What is up, everybody? It's a Wednesday morning edition of the Georgia Show. Palmer Toms, Jeremy Johnson, and our intro said it best. What a thrilling time to be alive if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan. Georgia is red hot on the recruiting trail, and we will get into it. Georgia baseball wraps up, and what a fun season that was. Jeremy, I know you got to be there for two of the games this weekend. I was there for the last four for the Bulldogs, going back to last weekend's regional. We will talk about that and so much more. But, Jeremy, we've got to start on the recruiting trail. That's your expertise. Georgia has added 2 commitments since we last talked on this show, on this platform. 4 commitments in the last week. Bulldogs, red hot.
Yeah, red hot is a great way to describe it. Picking up Tylen Taylor yesterday, and then the day before that, Todd Robinson. Man, that's 2 big pickups for Georgia. Todd Robinson's a guy that was initially offered as a running back. I think he's going to play defensive back. He's a South Georgia guy that plays quarterback, so he knows the game. Very physical guy, very explosive guy, a lot of speed. Tylen Taylor, I guess it's. I've always wondered how you say it. It's Tylen or Taylor Taylor. Sorry if I'm messing that up, man, but. One of those great route runner guys that, create space. Well, a lot of the little tricks and trade. He's really dangerous with the football in his hand, and he's got some speed that allows him to get over the top. And he's one of those guys that's going to be a big playmaker. You see here, they draw up some, little throws for him. So he's a guy that just is dangerous with the football in his hand. So I think Georgia got a great pickup in him. He's a top 70, top 60 type of guy in the class.
Yeah, currently listed at number 50 according to the On3 industry rankings. The number, I believe he's a number 9 wide receiver, if my recollection is correct. And man, that blocking right there that you see, that will fit in at Georgia. Kirby Smart obviously likes his receivers to be physical on the perimeter. That's how you really earn your way onto the field. That's a great way for somebody to come in early and earn those opportunities to run those routes and to, get the ball in their hands. If you are a willing blocker, Kirby Smart is willing to find you a spot on the field. And then obviously when you've got speed like this, acceleration and the ability to separate, that does it all. So EJ Holland from our Michigan site, the Wolverine, shot these clips, and we certainly are grateful because Taylor does not have his junior highlights posted. So there's a couple of shots from his junior season. And Jeremy, I think, this wide receiver room as a whole is obviously an interesting one. I know you've got a piece going up later today on what this means as a whole. Georgia heavily pursuing C.J. Wiley and Travis Smith, 2 in-state targets there. They've already got 1 in-state target in Thomas Blackshear, on board. And so spots are getting tight at wide receiver. Is it safe to say that? I mean, it doesn't feel like we're saying that all too often about wide receiver at Georgia. We're saying that about linebacker at Georgia and defensive line and offensive line. Georgia and wide receiver really feels like it's going to be a good combo this year.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I feel like, last year they only took 2 guys. I mean, I think they had 3 initially committed. Nycar flipped and went to Miami. So that may have even given them a little leeway to take an extra guy this year that they might have only wanted maybe 3 or 4. Maybe they can take 5 this year. But, they're losing a lot of guys in that group this year. I've talked to a couple guys. I'm just talking with Travis Smith. I mean, these guys know, hey, Georgia's losing 4 or 5 guys this year. And then you look into next year, there's a potential to lose a couple more. So there's going to be playing time, and these guys want to get on the field. And Georgia's offense has shown that, obviously they threw to Brock Bowers a lot, and I think they take a lot of flack for that. I feel like you would be a bad football coach if you didn't throw to Brock Bowers. So, I mean, this year I think you'll see the receivers more involved because there isn't a Brock Bowers. Oscar Delp is a fine football player, but he has not proven to be Brock Bowers at this point. So, I think that this is an opportunity for receivers to, kind of see what they're getting into. And I think this group has a chance to be a really special group. I mean, obviously you mentioned C.J. Wiley and Travis Smith. Those are the 2 guys everybody points to as they've been the priorities, and they've been, especially because they're in-state guys. So they're kind of the two we're looking at now. Like all eyes are on them. But I mean, there's other guys. You know, I saw a guy yesterday, Landon Rolden, who does not have an offer yet, but he's pretty impressive. So, you got guys like Javen Boggs who just kind of cut Georgia off his list. He was supposed to take an official. He's not taking an official anymore. Sam Turner just so happens to be in Athens today with his high school team. Just committed to Georgia Tech. That was another guy that has been on the radar. Derek Meadows took an official visit last week. That's another guy that we need to start talking about because he's definitely on the radar. He has not said anything that indicates that he isn't one of the guys that they're considering. So it's an interesting dynamic that's going to take place over the next, I guess, month or so with that group, because usually the receiver room, like you said, is not something that you're like, oh my God, the spots are really tight now. But that's the case right now. I mean, you may have 2 or 3 more spots, and that's going to be it. And they're all really good football players that are in consideration right now.
Yeah, and obviously I think the first 2 that people are watching as sort of dominoes to fall for Georgia would be Smith and Wiley. And I don't know that either of them has a date out. I would expect both of them to be committed by the time that the season starts. I think that's probably a fair expectation for the majority of this class of 2025. July is normally such a big month for Georgia. I remember last year that time right around the 4th of July, and the offensive linemen were coming off the board left and right. That was the run that Georgia was on there. This year, they are on a run right now. Zayden Walker last week. God, I can't even remember what day that was. Last Thursday, maybe.
Wednesday?
Yeah, Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, one of those days. Zayden Walker. They follow that up on Sunday with Christian Garrett. Monday, Todd Robinson. Tuesday, Talon Taylor. Are they going to get a Wednesday one? We will see. But, and look, if you want to throw in there last Friday, Elias Williams says he's shutting it down. And that is as big of a recruiting win as any of these commitments. He is Georgia's top-rated recruit in the class of 2025 right now, the number 1 tight end. And, man, Todd Hartley, we talk about Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp and, the way that room has been used. Williams has a chance to be that special. And so excited to see what is in store for him. I think you make a really good point about this receiver room. And here's a hint. Here's a tip to anybody that's trying to follow recruiting and get a sense for, well, how many guys is Georgia going to take at this position? How many guys are they going to take at that position? If you look at Georgia's roster and you look at who's going to be departing and you figure out, hey, they've got 5 guys that they feel like might leave in that receiver room. The transfer portal is going to be a factor, both in bringing guys in and guys heading out.
Yep.
So you can kind of, net zero there. But Georgia's going to want to recruit those positions that they are losing a lot at. Defensive line, they're losing a lot at this year. You've got 2 veteran guys in Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse. Michael Williams, whether you want to consider him an outside linebacker or a defensive end, to each his own, but he is part of that defensive front. You look at Kristen Miller is, now an upperclassman. Jordan Hall is going into a former 5-star is going into his second year. These guys, very quickly go from being recruits and guys that we're talking about on the recruiting trail. And is Georgia going to get them? Is Georgia going to sign them? Yada, yada, yada. To, hey, they are, potentially 3 and out type guys. And, they are very quickly in and out of the program in a blink of an eye. And, Georgia's working to replace those guys from the moment that they step on campus, it feels like. So
that's the problem with recruiting elite talent, is that you lose elite talent really quickly. You only get maybe 2 or 3 years of them and they're out. Absolutely.
And so you look at Georgia's receiver room, to go back to the conversation we were having with Taylor, they've got a very, very veteran group. Colby Young, graduate transfer. Michael Jackson, graduate transfer. Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas, both are going to be gone after this year. Arian Smith is an older guy. He would have a year of eligibility left, but man, it's hard to see him playing a 6th season at Georgia. Dylan Bell is somebody that could be, talking about the NFL in a 3-and-out type sense. And so that is 6 right there.
Yeah.
That doesn't even factor in guys that could transfer out.
Yeah. Like and then you got guys that'll play roles that could be big time next year that may go to the NFL. You got Anthony Evans that if he has a good year this year and has a good year next year, I mean, that's a guy that can go play in the NFL at some point. So that's 7 in the last 12 months that you'll have to try to replace.
And again, not even to mention the guys that transfer out. I mean, Georgia lost, I think, 3 to the portal this past class. And so, you've constantly got to be recruiting those positions. Greg Hendricks asks, what's the likelihood of Georgia flipping Justice Terry? Talk about the defensive line. That's another position. And Terry is certainly going to be one of those top targets. Elijah Griffin is going to be one of those top targets. And, to replace those guys, they're going to be recruiting these guys. And, I think it's probably fair to say the industry consensus around Terry is that Georgia should feel pretty good about flipping him. Obviously, as long as he is committed to USC, you don't feel, like that's a done deal by any means. But now that Georgia has been pursuing him heavily, obviously he was a commitment, and they have continued to pursue him heavily, as well as Isaiah Gibson, another USC commit.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I think they definitely are, a team that everybody kind of feels like that's going to continue to be a Georgia is going to be in there. So, and you talk about like obviously want to continue to recruit those positions because they play those guys so much, especially on that defensive front. Like all these guys are coming in to play. I mean, like out of the 5 or 6 guys they got last year, I mean, a lot of those guys will play this year. I mean, even if it's like 10 snaps a game, they will be on the field, and then they'll roll them in, and they'll be the guys next year. So, and then this group that comes in this year will do the same. So it's a position you always got to backfill because those guys they're in and out. And you mentioned Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry. I mean, those are guys that could be difference makers, like in the light of Jalen Carter, of Trevon Walker, that they're dominant players that playing in 3 years, and they're the top 2 or 3 picks in the draft. So that's another plus.
And those were guys that took on roles early in their Georgia career. I think for as much hate as people want to give him, Bear Alexander was somebody that was kind of in that same mold. Took on a role early in his Georgia career. Jordan Hall played early in his Georgia career as a true freshman. And so Georgia, going back to 2018, Jordan Davis was somebody that played early. Georgia will play you if you are a talented lineman. And, Davis would be the exception to this group because we're talking about elite talent, 5-star guys coming out of high school. He was not that, but Georgia very clearly realized and quickly realized what they had in him. And by midseason, that Florida game, he was out there and making an impact. And so, look, if you are wanting to get on the field early, especially on the defensive side of the ball, but, all these positions that rotate, receiver, defensive back, linebacker, defensive line, offensive line, probably not, quarterback, probably not, but tight end, they'll work you in. Running back, they'll work you in. If you're an elite talent and you are, potentially that 3-and-out type guy, Georgia's going to find a way to get you on the field. And so, that's why I think that when we're talking about, again, going back to this conversation with receivers, that's why, Georgia, that's why they feel like they can recruit a CJ Wiley and a Travis Smith, not only those two together, but on top of Talon Taylor. Number 9 receiver in the country, number 50 overall player, both those rankings per the On3 industry. And Jeremy, I'm going to pull that up for us here. We've got Georgia's class of 2025, now ranked number 3 in the nation. Just what do you see with this group?
I mean, a lot of size and athleticism and versatility. I mean, you talk about Zayden Walker. I mean, this is a guy that plays edge in high school, but he's being recruited as an inside linebacker. To me, that says, hey, you're gonna come to Georgia and you'll fit in that inside backer room, but then you'll play a role similar to what Jalen Walker does. I mean, Jalen Walker came to Georgia as an inside linebacker, but He's played on the edge most of his career, but he's also been one of those guys that when the quarterback hits that read option, I mean, he can make plays just because he has that background of
Channing Tindall was another one that they recruited that was an outside guy and transitioned inside.
Yeah. So I mean,
and Quay Walker would be another one that kind of played that hybrid linebacker type role as well. Channing maybe a little bit more of a sideline to sideline speed type guy, but I think that Quay is somebody worth mentioning with his size. Jalen, obviously, we're talking about a trio of Walkers with Quay, Jalen, and Zayden. None of those three are related.
Yeah. And then, I mean, again, with versatility, too. Like, you look at even the receivers that Georgia has right now, Taylor and even Thomas Blackshear. I mean, those guys play outside in high school, but they can play inside. And we've answered the question of if this player is just a slot player. I mean, I don't think Georgia's recruiting guys that just play slot anymore. I mean, they're obviously, if you look at their roster now, there's one guy, Dominic Lovett and Anthony Evans, and you look at those guys and immediately think slots. But you look at Thomas Blackshear. Thomas Blackshear is 6'1", 200 pounds almost. That's a big guy that can play in the slot, but he can also play outside. Taylor's not small either. He's about 6'1", so he can play outside, but he has the speed to play inside. So Ethan Barber, tight end that can play in the slot, play outside, play hand in the dirt. He can do a little bit of everything.
And here's a guy that's loving all these names that we're mentioning.
Yeah.
Ryan Montgomery, if you are not a YouTube viewer, we encourage you to do so. But quarterback commit Ryan Montgomery.
Yeah, he's got to be very excited because he's going to be well protected and he's going to have a little bit of everything to be able to use in that offense.
Jeremy, I want to get your thoughts on Todd Robinson here as we come up on him. One of Georgia's lower rated recruits. I think he comes in as the second lowest. Yep, just number 2 lowest. Number 419 in the country. Number 17 athlete in the country. Unrated in our on 300. What is it about Todd that I think is so intriguing? Because you can see it there with the industry comparison. There's some folks that really love him. I think Georgia would fall into that category of people that really love Todd Robinson. Yeah. I think his versatility is what intrigues me the most.
Yeah. I'm in agreement there. I mean, but just watching his tape, I mean, most of his tape is quarterback stuff. I mean,
all of it. I wrote the highlight story and I was like, man, for as much as Georgia sees him as, maybe a running back, he's recruited by Josh Crawford, but that probably has more to do with the Valdosta ties than it does position. Yeah. But really more so defensive back and T-Rob getting in there, for a guy that they think can play DB, that's sure is a lot of quarterback that we're seeing.
I mean, but then you kind of look at his dimensions, 5'11", 195, and this is him playing quarterback, and he's a high school student. I mean, so this is a guy that you'll look up, and he'll be 5'11", 205, 210 pounds by his junior year. So that's Chris Smith or Tyke Smith. That's that mode of player at safety or at the star position, and I think he has a lot of those same traits. I mean, you talk about speed, you talk about versatility, you talk about having played quarterback, he's going to have a different understanding of what secondaries are supposed to be doing. So they're not going to have to teach him a lot of that stuff. It's just the physical stuff and learning how to tackle, being willing to tackle. That's going to take a minute, and he's going to have to do it at the college level, but he has time because Georgia just signed KJ Bolden. They just signed Ellis Robinson, DeMello Jones. So it's not like this guy has to come in and play, but I think this is a guy that 2 years from now, like, man, where did he come from? Yeah. Well, there's a trait that Georgia loves, and it's called speed. I mean, this guy, you watch him run, and he has South Georgia defensive backs. When I say that, that means there's a lot of speed down there, and he's making those guys have to readjust what they want to do because he broke their angle so quickly and got upfield. And once he's out there in space, there's no catching him. He's very explosive. So those traits equal, hey, you can play defensive back at Georgia. That's what they're looking for.
So correct me if I'm wrong. He doesn't play defensive back at Valdosta, right?
No, not up to this point. He has not.
And I think that's especially interesting because we're talking about, 6A, 7A school, one of the bigger ones in the state. When we're talking about a quarterback at that level, typically those are guys that are going and getting recruited to some big time schools.
Yeah.
We're looking at a good quarterback at that level, but he's being recruited to Georgia as a defensive back. To me, I think that is just such a testament to his overall athletic ability. And again, there's not many people I would trust evaluating defensive backs more than Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, who's still around this program, T-Rob, Dante Williams. I mean, you want to talk about the masterminds of DBs in the country now that Nick Saban is no longer there. It's got to be Kirby Smart.
Yeah, that's a strong group of people to evaluate a defensive back for sure. And they said this guy is a defensive back. After just watching his highlight tape and watching him work out, I trust him. I trust him up to this point. So there's no reason to think that this guy is anything better than, anything other than a really good football player for sure.
Yep. Well, that will take us into an ad here for My Perfect Franchise. You talk about really good football players. This is a really good company that we work with, and we are so happy to work with. Are you a displaced corporate executive or wanting to put your career in your own hands, or are you an experienced entrepreneur wanting to diversify? Well, Andy Ludicky and MyPerfectFranchise.net can help. Andy's a huge college sports fan and a franchise veteran, having owned several franchises and businesses. Using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough consultation and evaluation process. Call Andy and put your life and career in your own hands. Best of all, his services are 100%, I repeat, 100% free to you. So what do you have to lose? Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. That is myperfectfranchise.net. And we are so grateful to work with Andy and company there with My Perfect Franchise. Always a great one to talk about. Jeremy, Georgia going to have another big week of visits here. This is turning into a little bit of a recruiting heavy show. And I know you guys are probably looking at me saying, Palmer, you're the team guy. Why are you on the recruiting show? That might be a sign to y'all. Roos and Rusty, pretty busy right now. So stay tuned. We've got an official visitor list that just went up earlier this morning. Jeremy, you had a 7-on-7 and lineman camp list. Georgia hosted an impressive group yesterday. They've got an even more impressive group today. You were at a 7-on-7 at Georgia Tech yesterday. And then they will have a really, really, once again, impressive group, for the official visits this weekend. Let's focus in on that, the group that they've got there. We're not going to give too much away. I would encourage you all to come check that out. Use promo code UGA1 for our YouTube viewers. 2 months for $1 of full On3 DawgsHQ premium access, and you can check out our visit lists and whether that's today's groups of teams and players that are on campus for the camps and 7-on-7s or the official visitors this weekend. One name, Jeremy, what is one name that intrigues you the most? Whether it's a guy that you just really like his tape or somebody that you think Georgia can make up a lot of ground on. Who's that one guy on this weekend's list?
Man, I want to go with. I mean, there's a couple obvious ones. I'm gonna go with Julius Holly just because he just picked up an offer. He's an in-state guy, trains with Marcus Howard, former Georgia edge rusher Marcus Howard. And I know that offer from Georgia was a big one for him. And Georgia's kind of like he's had a couple like teams that have been really high on him: Michigan, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Like Georgia's playing a little catch up there just because they hadn't offered, but I feel like this weekend and this official visit could be very big for him, just because like I said, they've officially entered that race for his recruitment, and I know that this is going to be a big one. And if it goes well, Georgia could be in a really good spot in that one coming out of that visit. Obviously, it's a position of need. The edge spot we mentioned that eventually Michael Williams is going to go to the NFL, and Michael Williams deserves to go play in the NFL. He's a really talented football player, so Georgia is going to need guys to eventually come in and go put some heat on the passer. I mean, they have one guy committed, and Darren Kennebaum was a really good football player as well. So, obviously there's some other guys on the board too. So as many of these guys as you can get, go for it. And I think Julius Holly is a name that I really like. Just haven't seen him, and so I really like his tape too. So
yeah, it's almost like you read my mind. I'm also going to stick with that edge position. Bryce Davis. Yeah. I mean, somebody that Georgia's been on for a long time. A long frame that he's got, 6'2.5", 245. Lot to like with this kid out of Grimsley. It's a school that has treated Georgia well before, a state that has treated Georgia well before. Some really impressive defensive players have come out of that state that have ended up as Bulldogs. And man, I mean, that is just, it's not necessarily the pipeline that you would think, like, oh, hey, North Carolina, it's not a school, it's not a state that has an SEC school. It's obviously got a lot of ACC ties with Duke and Wake Forest and NC State and North Carolina. You've obviously, when I think North Carolina, I probably think more, culturally, maybe it's more Virginia and South Carolina, which would bring Virginia Tech and Virginia and Clemson into play. But man, Georgia has had a lot of success in North Carolina, whether it was Jordan Davis back in 2018, Jalen Walker, Kyron Jones, Chris Peel is another one. Yeah. Jamal Jarrett, who came from Grimsley, if I'm correct.
Yep.
Georgia has had some success in that state. So Bryce Davis is somebody that I really like. He is number 69 overall player, number 9 edge in the country, according to the On3 industry rankings. Georgia, Duke, South Carolina, Clemson, those are your top schools with him. And man, it just feels like, again, I don't think that he has a date set. No, he does have a date set, is what this is.
July the 20th, I believe.
July 20th, correct. We'll choose between Clemson, Duke, Georgia, and I believe he just recently set up a South Carolina official visit as well. Georgia has been in that one for a long time. And I really like their chances there as they continue to battle for him. He's one that I would watch. He's one that I would watch, whether it's his tape or whatnot. I would be keeping an eye on Bryce Davis as, again, that edge class. You talk about, Julius Holly, Bryce Davis. Georgia has a player committed there already. Isaiah Gibson is somebody that they are heavily pursuing. Another position that they just cannot get enough at. And I think that some of that, the need at edge probably has to do with they didn't necessarily finish out the Dan Lanning era recruiting incredibly strong. They have started this Chidera Uzo-Diribe era recruiting pretty well, but Marvin Jones Jr. is gone. And you've got you recruited 3 in the class of 2023, but one of those is now playing defensive end. And Gabe Harris and Sam Mpemba might be more of a development guy. With given his background in sports, wasn't necessarily a plug and play. Jamin Wilson, probably more of that plug and play. I think we saw that throughout their freshman year. That's not to say that Mpemba can't be a player for Georgia, and that Jamin Wilson won't continue to be one. And I think all 3 of those guys are very highly thought of at Georgia. But you're going to continue to see them recruit because they lose Chaz Chambliss at that position. They're going to lose Michael Williams at an edge position, whether it's defensive end or outside linebacker. And really you see a lot of overlap between those two because I think in talking to Isaiah at the On3 Elite, I asked him, I said, hey, where does Georgia see you? Do they see you more of as a, outside linebacker, stand-up type guy? Do they see you hand in the dirt? Do they see you maybe a little bit like Michael Williams where it's a little bit of both? And he said, yeah, I think it's that Michael Williams, Trayvon Walker build where, they feel comfortable putting my hand in the dirt. They feel comfortable standing me up and letting me, make some plays. And so interested to see how that recruitment plays out, interested to see how this season plays out for Michael. And regardless of who Georgia lands, I think that they've got some really highly thought of, high caliber prospects at that edge position. Bryce Davis, Julius Howley, among those that will be on campus this weekend.
All those guys are a little different too. Like that's the thing, is that none of them are the same player. Darren Akinobong is a really good run defender. You mentioned
I watched his tape for the first time, and I did not realize just how big he is.
He is huge. He's huge.
Again, I encourage y'all to go watch his tape if you haven't. That was a fun watch. I got into some huddle highlights of Georgia's class of 25 and some of these top prospects last week with a little bit of time to kill. But, yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's lining up more as a defensive tackle in some of his highlights. And I don't know what the competition is like that he's playing. But, I think that you can see the traits are there for him to translate to an outside linebacker, edge type player in at the college level, defensive end, outside linebacker. Really like a lot that is there, and really like a lot of these players that are on this official visit list, and an unofficial visitor. I'll just hint that out there. There's an unofficial visitor that Georgia fans know the name of. Big name that is going to be in town for that. So encourage you all to go check out our visit list. Jeremy, we got to talk about this because obviously this was the news of the weekend for Georgia. When it came to sports, baseball gets knocked out of the NCAA tournament in the super regional round. Disappointing, I would say. Not that this season as a whole was disappointing. There is absolutely no reason to be disappointed in this team. But I think that anytime you are 9 clean innings that this team was capable of playing away from getting to Omaha, it's going to sting. And so they were so close to accomplishing their goal. They did not accomplish that goal. That doesn't take away from what a special season it was. First year under head coach Wes Johnson, to go to a place in the super regional round and advance out of the regionals, to host a regional, to be a national seed, things that Georgia hasn't done since 2008. They've been a national seed. They've hosted regionals, but they haven't advanced. They advanced for the first time since 2008. They get to that super regional. They're 1 game away from Omaha, just come up a little bit short. A lot that they can be proud of with this team, a lot to look forward to with the future of this team. Trey Phelps had a phenomenal weekend, started that super regional game 3 for 3, had a home run in his first at bat that put Georgia ahead, had a big blast on Saturday over the batter's eye at Foley Field. Obviously had a big home run against Georgia Tech as well. Just a true freshman this past season, and he's going to be a big piece of this future. Georgia, I feel pretty confident in saying, will not have Charlie Condon there next year.
Yeah, he needs to go and
I joked with folks because we were talking to Charlie after the game, and I asked him, I said, hey, Charlie, how much do you see this year as a proof of concept for Georgia baseball, Wes Johnson, the future of this program? And in his answer, he was like, whether I'm here next year or not. And I joked with some folks, I was like, who's going to jump on the Charlie Condon hints at potential comeback story? Nobody did that, because I think that we all feel pretty confident that he is going to be going pro, going to be going early in the MLB draft this summer, likely to win a couple of these National Player of the Year awards. And what a phenomenal year that he had. What a phenomenal career that he had, capped off with a home run in his last at bat. He feels confident in this program moving forward. And that says a lot for a player like that, to, know that, hey, I'm leaving this team and I feel very good that this team is going to be dangerous for years to come, whether it's Trey Phelps, the guys that they are getting out of the transfer portal. There is, like I said, proof of concept. A couple of these true freshmen that are coming in. Bryce Clavon, a guy that you probably know more from the football side of things.
Football field.
He is a stud on the baseball field.
Yeah.
There is proof of concept and reason to be excited about Georgia baseball moving forward. I know our board feels that way. Again, if you all want to get involved in that conversation, just $1. UGA1 is your promo code. We'll have you covered throughout the offseason. Transfer portal, very much, a hot topic of discussion right now, with Georgia continuing to add to its class. Some of these publications out there, there's really no consensus with baseball recruiting, but some of these publications have Georgia's class really high already, and they're going to continue to want to add to that.
You can feel it. You can feel it. I mean, the atmosphere in this weekend was amazing. It was like, it's been a while since I've seen Foley Field like that. That was pretty cool. Definitely has some similarities to what the football team went through in Kirby's first couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that was a comparison we saw on the board of like, hey, to say that you weren't upset in 2017 when Georgia lost in that national championship game to Alabama, you'd be lying. Yeah. To get that close and come up short and not come away with a trophy, you're going to be upset about that. But there's no reason to be disappointed in the season. There's no reason to be. You can be disappointed in the result. You can't be disappointed in the team or the season, because they just like that 2017 football team, this 2024 baseball team very much outperformed expectations. And yes, they came up short of an ultimate goal. But there is a lot of reason to be excited about the promising future that is out there. One more thing that we will touch on very quickly, and if there's any comments, questions in the chat, we'll take those as well. We might hit a couple of those. But SEC announces scheduling windows for this football season. Pretty lame announcement, if I've got to say. Maybe it's just that we already knew half of Georgia's football schedule and exact kickoff times for those games. That we are all very grateful for. That's something that hasn't necessarily been true. Georgia will kick off at noon against Clemson, 2:00 against Tennessee Tech, 7:30 against Kentucky, 7:30 against Alabama, 3:30 against Florida, 7:30 against Georgia Tech. We knew all of those, but yesterday the league announces a 12:45 kick for the UMass game in November. Emphasis on November there, because 12:45 in November feels a lot different than 12:45 in September. And then flex designation for 5 games for Georgia: Auburn, Mississippi State, Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee. That means that those games will either be in the afternoon or night window. We will learn whether that is which window, the 3:30 to 4:30 time or the 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock time. We will learn that 12 days ahead of kickoff, and then the exact time and the TV network, we will learn those at 6 days in advance. So I would say it's an improvement. We're taking steps in this first year of the SEC, ABC, ESPN scheduling contract, TV contract. We're taking steps in the right direction to getting this stuff figured out well in advance. Folks can make some travel plans, make some tailgate plans. Now knowing that Georgia will kick off one game outside before 2:00 this entire season, and that is in November. They will play at noon indoors at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They will play at 2:00. That will be the earliest home date outside of that UMass one. But yeah, Auburn, Mississippi State, Tennessee, those 3 home games, somewhere from 3:30 p.m. Eastern on. And I think that is certainly welcome news, that these marquee games are not going to be, at noon, at 3:30, like we've seen in the past with the SEC and CBS agreement. ABC
definitely smart business. I mean, you got Georgia, one of the, Georgia's been in the national championship for 2 out of the last 3 years. You definitely want to make sure you're able to get those kind of programs on TV at night when everyone's watching. So that's just smart business by ESPN for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is. So, well, we don't see too many questions in the chat, so that'll wrap us up for this edition of the Georgia Show. Again, encourage you all to come check us out on DawgsHQ. Big recruiting weekend, big visit time. It is always an exciting time. Man, just, we were talking about this in our chat. Used to be the slow days in June. You would, kind of take a break. You could get away. Jake Rowe has done that and gotten away this week. Maybe y'all don't want him to come back with the commitment run that Georgia is on. But it used to be a slower time of year. That is now absolutely not the case. Recruiting news out the wazoo. Just decisions, visits in June, decisions in July. And then, before you know it, we're talking media days and the kickoff to fall camp and the football season this fall. So never been a better time to join DawgsHQ. Use promo code UGA1 to get $1 2 months for our YouTube viewers. That'll do it for us on this edition of the Georgia Show. Y'all have a great rest of the week. For Jeremy Johnson and Palmer Toms, this has been the Georgia Show.